Hey y'all, welcome to Prepper Friday. I'm Madden from Self-Reliance Publishing, and today we're going to introduce a series that I'm going to be doing called How to Live Off the Land in the City. Now this is going to be done from the perspective of living off of the natural resources that the city has to offer. Not so much backyard homesteading. I talk about that in other parts of my channel, so if you're interested in that, be sure to check out Homesteader Monday. But this specific series is going to be more about how to utilize the natural resources that the city has to offer. A lot of people overlook the natural resources in the city. They feel that if you're inside the city limits, there's a void of natural resources like wildlife and plant matter and stuff that is useful for life. And that's just not the case. You'd be shocked at the amount of wildlife that lives within the city. I've got this kind of wooded looking backdrop behind me, but the fact of the matter is I'm actually in the middle of Raleigh, North Carolina right now, which is the capital city of the state of North Carolina. I'm walking distance to a mall that way, and I'm walking distance to a mall that way. And my neighborhood, my subdivision, is just on the other side of that creek right there. So I really am in the middle of the city, despite what it may look like. And I've lived here my entire life. I've always wanted to live in the country, and it just hasn't panned out. I was actually 1 week away from closing on a house out in the country on 18 acres, and I was super excited. It met all of the requirements that I was looking for, and I thought it was going to be the perfect place for me. But turns out that God had other plans. He has me being here right now, and I have to be okay with that. And part of being okay with that is finding a way to be as self-sufficient as possible with where I'm at, which is in the city. And something that I kind of like about that with this channel is I'm sure that I'm not the only person in that situation. I'm sure I'm not the only person that would love to be out in the country and be able to utilize the resources that the country has to offer you, but just because of life is kind of stuck inside the city limits. And I'm looking for ways to overcome that as much as possible with backyard homesteading, but also looking for wildlife, looking for wild plants and whatnot. So in this series of videos, we're going to cover a couple of food sources that you may be able to find naturally within the city that you live in. Now this stuff that I'm going to cover is going to be specific to my area, so it might not be readily applicable to you. If you live in San Francisco or New York City, you might have different resources than I do here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and that's okay. You might not be able to do exactly the same, utilize exactly the same resources that I'm talking about here, but hopefully it'll at least point you in the right direction and get you thinking about looking at what's available around you. So some things that I'm going to be talking about in this series are the wildlife available to you. And some of the wildlife that we're going to look at is going to be aquatic life. So primarily fish, but also the frogs, toads, turtles, and whatnot that live around the water. Small game in this area, that would primarily be squirrels, but also rabbits to a certain extent, muskrats. Medium-sized game, rabbits, possums, and the like, and large game. Believe it or not, there's actually, at least in this area, a lot of deer living within the city. I live in, like I already said, I live in the middle of a subdivision in the middle of the city, walking distance to a couple of malls, and I have deer on my property. And I just live on a third of an acre lot. And so we're going to seek out some of these wildlife and maybe give you some ideas on how to find them. In my hand, I've got my game camera, and I'm going to be setting that up along this creek here. Actually, I'm going to set it up on this power line right away, right over here. I see all kinds of deer sign out here, and I'm going to set up this camera and just to show you that deer do exist within the city limits. We're also going to talk about utilizing birds as a potential source of meat, whether they be pigeons, geese, ducks, whatever local birds you have available to you, and also some useful plant life. So your different trees, whether they be fruit trees, nut trees, smaller herbaceous plants, bushes, what have you. We're going to identify some of the plants that I have available to me here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I wouldn't necessarily utilize all of these food sources right here and right now. For one thing, it's basically going to be illegal to take most of this game. Some cities in North Carolina allow you to hunt deer within their city limits. Raleigh, to the best of my knowledge, is not one of those cities. And a lot of the places where I find signs of game are along greenway trails here in Raleigh, and it is specifically forbidden to hunt, trap, or molest wildlife along the greenway system. So it's outside of the law, for one thing. And also, you don't know what some of these animals have been eating, if the raccoons have been getting into garbage, and pigeons, what they've been eating and whatnot. So if you have other alternatives, I'm not recommending you utilize this wildlife as a steady diet right here, right now. But if times got tough and it was utilizing these resources or starving, cook the living daylights out of the meat and don't really worry about what those animals have been eating. It's probably not going to kill you. Now, something to keep in mind when it comes to taking game, if you were to find yourself in a position where you need to utilize this wildlife to feed yourself and your family and your friends, then firearms might not be the best way to go, because we're in the city, we're on top of each other, so there's a safety aspect of it, and you also don't want to call attention to yourself. And if you go tramping through the city carrying your rifle, or if you fire it, you're going to alert everybody around you that you just fired a weapon, and you're either killing somebody or you're killing something to eat, and it's just going to call unwanted attention to yourself. So this is an area and a reason why I think it's good to practice with some primitive skills or primitive weapons. I've got a series going on right now with different primitive weapons that you can make and use to gather game in a survival situation, or in this case, talking about living off the land in the city, different primitive weapons that you can use to gather game in the city. And primitive weapons have some things going for them in that they're inconspicuous. They're not going to draw attention to you. If you're using a sling, you can roll it up and put it in your pocket, and nobody's going to know you have it. You use a rabbit stick, you're just carrying a stick around. And actually using the weapons is generally silent as well. So you can take your game silently and not alert the whole neighborhood that you have just put a meal on the table. So with that said, I look forward to doing this series with you. I hope that you enjoy it. As always, I appreciate every like, every comment, and every subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.